Hi, welcome to Pay It Forward. Now I promised you all some little Christmas patterns, so I've come up with, I thought we'd start with a very sweet little mini Christmas tree. It's absolutely perfect for a table setting or perhaps for somebody's office desk at work. So it uses up all your little pretty little beads, bit of hand sewing involved, but it's really simple and straightforward, made up with felt. So all you need to do is use your free pattern, which of course is in the description below. Simply click on the link and download those. There's just a couple of pattern templates. Set your printer to print at actual size and they will be absolutely spot on. So let's get making our little tree. So let's get started on our little Christmas tree. So I have my Christmas tree pieces. Now what I've done here is I've actually cut these pieces from double felt. Double felt is two pieces of felt joined together with fusible webbing or heat and bond. And I usually join my felt squares together as one piece and then I cut my individual pieces from that. I've actually got a video that shows you how to prepare your felt in that way, and I'm going to put that link up there for you. And you can see there that what I've done is I've used two different colours, two different greens there. You can make them all in the same colour. But if you've got the two different colours, it means we can alternate those colours around that little tree. It gives you a little bit more depth perception, which is really sweet. So all in all, we need 8 of those little tree pieces, and they're quite solid. I make it in double felt so that the little tree really holds itself really well. And you're also going to need, we're going to need clear craft glue. We're going to need a fair bit of clear craft glue. And make sure that one's suitable for fabric. And we're also going to need some kind of a little base. Now I'm using what is pretty much a universal size little cap. It's a little aerosol cap off of a can. You may even have a little pot that you can use that's about the same size. And I think you can get little terracotta pots, that sort of thing, from, you know, like your Dollar Tree stores and so on. I'm going to be showing you how to cover this with some felt. So I haven't given you an actual measurement because I'm going to show you how to measure that up and cover a little cap just in case yours isn't the same size as mine. So we're going to be needing some extra felt for that, and you can use any colour you like. And we're also going to need our little beads. So we've got all sorts of all different sizes here. And I'm probably not going to use the biggest ones, and they are going to be stitched into our little tree as we go. So you need quite a few of those, and there's so many available, so many pretty colours. And also remember, with my tree I'm making it the classic green, but of course I think this little pattern would look amazing made up in white and cream with these sorts of little baubles. Would look so pretty. Because Christmas trees now are so many different colours. And you're also going to need your extra strong thread for actually sewing all those little beads on. We're going to be doing a blanket stitch, and we're going to be incorporating those beads. So I do use my extra strong top stitching thread, my Gutermann thread, and of course you can choose your colours. You can even alternate your colours as we go, and I'll show you what we do there. So to start with, what we're going to need to do is each of our little tree pieces, we're going to take them to the iron and we're going to press them exactly in half. You see that there? That one is pressed, so because we're going to be actually gluing them together in segments. So we're going to press them together, but you can see here I've got my dark green in the centre. So I'm going to press 4 of them that way, and then I'm going to press another 4, the other 4 this way, so that I will be able to alternate them around the tree. So just get those all pressed nice and flat, and make sure that everything is lined up, because these are going to be our stitching lines here. So we want everything lined up beautifully. So get those all pressed, and then I'll show you the next step. Once you have all of your little tree pieces pressed, you can see there that what I've gone ahead and done, it's probably easier to see on this piece. I've gone ahead and I have stitched that little crease in so that it's permanently folded.
on the machine. Now I set my stitch length to 2.5. It's quite a few layers to get through there, but you'll find it's quite easy to sew. I also use a jeans needle when I'm sewing this kind of thing and this kind of weight. And so what I'm going to do now, I said to you about folding them alternatively with the lighter green on the outside and the lighter green on the inside. So our next step is we're actually going to glue these all together in a stack just like this, and we want them all lined up. So we're going to start with this one. So this one's just folded, same as all the others, and we're going to use our craft glue, and we're going to glue quite liberally the entire piece. You don't have to get too close to the edges here. The edge from here to there, the edges we're going to be stitching, and we're going to be sewing them, so you don't have to get right close to the edge, and we want to avoid too much glue escaping out. There we go. So I have that piece all glued up, and you see I've particularly made sure I've got glue up what will be the spine of our little tree. And so now our next step, now this one is green on the lighter green on the outside, so my next one of course is the darker green, and we're just going to alternate them. And it really is just a matter of lining those up perfectly. Particularly you want this edge to be nicely lined up so that they're all the same. When we open this little tree out, we're going to get that lovely little concertina sort of a look. And we're just going to make sure that those edges are really pressed down. Now this is going to take a little bit of time, but do take your time. You can trim it because of the way we're making it. You can certainly trim it up afterwards if you've got any excess or really uneven edges. It's fine to trim them up. So you basically are going to make this little stack and keep a lot of pressure on that, and then when it's all done, it will all open up. Very much like a little Christmas ornament. So you can use clips to hold it in place while it's drying. You could do 4 at a time if that's easier for you, and then join them together to make a pile of 8. Once it's all dry, we'll pull that final one around to join that whole little tree. So for now, it's just a matter of making up that little stack, and you're going to end up with that full little stack all glued together. You can put something heavy on top, and then we need that to absolutely thoroughly dry before we move on from there. Now that my little tree's glue is dry, you can see that we can just pull those 2 end pieces around, and that's what actually creates our little tree. Don't worry about any glue bits you've got here. We can go ahead and trim those up, because these are the edges that we're going to be sewing with a blanket stitch, and we're going to be incorporating our little beads as we do that. So, but first of all, we've got to glue this final panel. So it's just a matter of applying your glue just exactly as we did before, and then we're going to pinch those 2 together, and you might want to add your little wonder clips with this one while it's drying. And also, once my glue is on, I will throw a couple of pins in, because what we really want to do is make sure that this spine of the tree is nicely glued in together. So then it's all held in nice and tight, and then it's very, very stable. So you can go ahead and glue that one, pop your clips in and your pins in, and again we will set that aside to dry. And so now that all of my glue is dry, we've got our little tree shape. You can see there. And it's very, very strong. You see this little section will just sit into our little cup or our little pot. And now what we're going to do is stitch each of those little pieces there down. So we're going to be sewing with a blanket stitch, but we're going to be adding the little beads as we go. And this is actually what I call a beaded blanket stitch. And you can pull your other pieces out of the way. And so we're going to be sewing each one down to this the base of the tree here. We don't need to sew this one, we won't be seeing that at all. So just down to here, and your beading section is only along this top line. Then we just blanket stitch to the edge here. So You can see I've just come in at the top there because we've got a little space, got a knot in the end of my thread, and I'm using an extra strong thread. Now I'm currently using the green, but you can mix it up as you go if you like, and you can change it to a gold or a red or whatever colour suits your project, but sometimes it's nice to alternate those threads as you go. So I do actually have a video that shows you how to sew a beaded blanket stitch, so I'm going to put that link up there for you, and you can have a look at that one. Now as we go along, we want to keep it all quite random, so I'm going to be adding a little bead as I go. So before I make my stitch, I actually add a little bead, you can see there, to my thread. I'm going to pull that one all the way through, and normally all our blanket stitches we have them staying the same size, but because we're going to be alternating the size of our beads, just make your next stitch large enough to accommodate that little bead. So we're going to go through both layers, just about the width of the bead, go through both, and we make sure that we go through the loop, and as we come back out we just let that little bead settle into place on top of that stitch. Now I'm not going to add a bead with every single stitch. I'm going to do just a random assortment as I go, and you can see this is the part of this little project that takes a little bit of time, but it's well worth it in the end, because there's no other way to get a really nice clean beaded edge like that. I mean, you could just sew your little beads on at intervals where you want them, but then you won't get that nice finished look of that blanket stitch with it. So in between my little beads I'll just do 1 or 2 little blanket stitches, and then I'll add another little bead. So I'm going to just add another one now and keep the sizing different as you go. So just about choosing another little one, we'll go for a little gold one, thread that one down. And yes, it does look time consuming, and it is a little time consuming, but it will be worth it. So just making that little stitch again, just wide enough to accommodate that next little bead. I've got my thread quite long. It does cause me to tangle a little bit, but I'd rather not be interrupted as I go. So you can see I've got that next one there. I can do a couple more stitches, add another bead, and keep going with that beading. And I mean, I'm going to be adding some significantly larger beads as I go, so that little stitch will change, but bring that stitch back to small again in between your beads. So I'm going to work along that edge there, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Now there you can see, probably see that better now, that I've stitched that full line in along that edge there, and you can see how I've kept all those little beads random. So a few little ones, a bit bigger one, and just alternated them down, and a couple of times right close together, and alternated those colours. Now you can see also that I have changed the stitch width as I've gone over the larger beads, but it keeps them all incorporated, sitting right on top of that seam, and it also in between binds those little felt edges together for that really neat and clean finish. And you can see when I've got to the bottom here, I've just sewn that blanket stitch right to the bottom. So what we're going to end up with is our little Christmas tree that's got this lovely row of beads on every single piece there. And so as I go on, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and do exactly the same thing to every one of those little edges, and I'm going to be watching as I stitch my little beads on. I'm going to be watching what I did on the one next to me. So my large bead, I'm not going to line it up, I'm going to probably be settling it in the middle here. So you want to keep it alternated and certainly not mirrored, so all nice and random, and you'd be surprised the size of the beads that you can incorporate here. Just remember, in between adding a bead, bring your stitches back to that nice little small stitch, and you can have just the most amazing little colour combinations there. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to all of my 8 edges there. Okay, phew, that's a lot of hand sewing those little beads on, but you can see the result is absolutely well worth it. It's just so well sealed and they're so perfectly lined on those little edges. I love this little effect. Now you can imagine I've just gone with the absolute most basic and just very basic beads. You can really select your beads carefully and make some incredible combinations. And you can go quite large with the beads. It doesn't matter. You can have your baubles sitting exactly where you want them. Or perhaps you just would want a fine little pearl bead on every single one. Totally up to you. And now that you see that, you can imagine it in the beautiful white and cream with all of those beautiful Christmas colours. Would work so well. Again, if you're making it in the white and cream, do make sure that you do those alternative panels, because it really does make a difference. You can see where they're turning around, it looks beautiful. So, and it's very strong. So you can see there that now our next step is we're just going to create some kind of a base. Now I haven't been too precise with this because of course you're going to be using something different to me probably. Maybe something similar. Now this is an aerosol cap, as I said at the beginning. It suits this little project because for me, mine is going to sit straight in there. And then that's it. No more fuss. That's it. So long as that little base is covered, it's nice and stable. So, and of course yours, whatever your base is, you can trim these down to fit your little base. And maybe you've got a tiny little planter pot would be so cute for this. So now I want to cover this. I won't be sewing this. I think the best result is to glue it. Now there's two ways you can do it. You can cover it in felt, which will work beautifully, or you can use perhaps a glitter foam. I'm actually going to go with the glitter foam this time. I like my red here. It's not a very, it's a nice lighter red. So we're going to go with that. Now measuring your little cap to cover is as simple as taking, if you've got a flexible tape, you want to measure around your outside edge obviously, and what I would do, you can also do this with a piece of paper and then measure the piece of paper afterwards if you don't have a flexi tape. And so I always add perhaps another 4 millimeters for a bit of overlap. Definitely with if you're covering it with felt, you'll need a little bit of overlap. If you're covering it with glitter foam, as I am, you want it exact, but keep the overlap there, and then as you're gluing it, you can cut it to slot that in perfectly. So also with the same with the sides, we're going to be adding our little base, and that's going to be glued on first. So we want to measure our little sides there and give ourselves maybe an extra 2 millimeters that will just accommodate that little base and just make sure that that very top edge is nicely covered. So make your measurements, and then it's just a matter of cutting out your pieces. Of course, for your little base disc, that's just as simple as popping your little cap on there and drawing around it with your pen and cutting that one out. So it's really quite simple. And before you go ahead, and we're first going to glue our base disc on, because then when we put our side panel on, we're going to cover that little seam there nicely and it'll all be quite fluid there. So, but before you add this one, of course you can decorate this piece any way you like. You could add, if you're doing it in felt, of course you could sew some little applique Christmassy shapes. You might have, you know, some extra little trinkety things you want to pop on there before we glue it on. And I'm going to keep it quite simple, and I'm going to just add a little row of a silver rickrack there, which will just tie in nicely. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to glue my base on first, and then I'm going to glue my sides on with my hot glue. You can use clear craft glue if you like. You'll just need to wait a little bit longer for your drying time. And I will also add my little braid. So there you can see there's my little base, and it's all nicely covered, and you can add anything you like to that. So my final step for this little one, and of course you can hot glue mine is such a snug fit, that I don't need to do that, but you can hot glue your little tree into your base if you like. Okay, so our final step is I like to have something at the top, obviously. Now, again, I've left this to your imagination. I'm sure that you've got lovely little trinkets and ornaments that could make a lovely Christmas star. I'm just going to go absolutely basic. I'm going to use my same glitter foam. I've given you a little template for this one, for this little star in your little pattern pieces, and I've just cut 2 of those out of my glitter foam. I've got the other one here on my old needle. Now I'm going to add a little bead as well, so I'm going to be slipping this needle through my bead, and then that's just going to sit straight in the top of my little tree there to finish that off. So because my bead has a very little hole, I've gone for an old needle, but normally I would use a little wooden skewer. Would work perfectly. It would sit down there in that tree, and you can hot glue it in if you like, or you don't have to. This is very ornamental, so it won't get touched much. So I can see I've just hot glued that little one onto my needle, and then I'm going to go and add the little one on the back, and that will give me a little double-sided star. And then that's just as simple as adding my little bead and into my tree. So you can see that's really quite a simple process. But as I said, you may have a beautiful little star that you can attach to a little wooden skewer and just add that into the top. And there we have our finished little Christmas tree. My little star on top. And it's very, very pretty. It's perfect for a little office desk. It's very neat and tidy. Now, a couple of things you can do to it. Of course, you could, like I said, you could hang little trinkets on it from each of those little baubles. You could also use metallic thread to go from bough to bough and around, and you can create your little tinsel. There's so many little trims and braids that you could add to it. I've given you the basics, and so you can go ahead and run with that. You can also make this, try this one up and do it with the kids in scrapbooking papers, cardstock, and all the different Christmas colours, and this pattern will work just as well. If you make it up in paper, you can still put it in the little cup and cover the little cup with paper, and of course you don't have your little beads on the edge, but you can also add little things. So that's something to think of, making it up in cardstock. So I hope you've enjoyed making my little tiny Christmas tree.
Well, thank you all for joining me today. I hope you come up with some really fabulous colours, some really modern colours for your Christmas trees. Hope you've got someone lovely to give them to. It's a great way to pay it forward. Are you following me on Instagram? You can, and if you are, thank you so much. And I'm loving the pictures that you're sending me of your finished projects. I'm absolutely astounded at the skill level that so many of you have. It's really wonderful. So keep those pictures coming, and I'll be pinning them on a Pinterest board I've got made specially for you all. Coming up, I've got some little mini quilts coming up. I'm in a mini quilt design frenzy at the moment, so I'm really enjoying that. I'm very busy designing at the moment, so lots of patterns coming your way, all of them free of course. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss any of those. Thank you so much everybody for all of your wonderful comments and support. Keep talking to me in the comments. I love it. It's my little connection to the world. So in the meantime, make sure all of the lovely things that come your way, make sure that you pay them forward. And until next time, it's hooroo from me.